This is Bristol Temple Combe Road Shed. At the moment, it's only got a couple of Black Fives on it, but later on, it's got loads of engines. How do I know? Because it's part of the Great British Model Railway Show 2024 at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon. So let's go in and see what the show has to offer. We first come to Eastgate Harbour by Robin Brogden. It's a 4mm scale OO gauge layout. This DCC operated layout depicts a fictional port located on the English Channel coast of Kent. The model was inspired by Folkestone Harbour Station, but although it includes some of the features of that station, that's where the resemblance ends. The layout is set around 1946-1947. The war is over, though there is still a military presence in the area. The Southern Railway is still very much in charge, but not for much longer. The port is very active, with an SR steamer service operated by the fictionist T.S. Leeds Castle, which at 42-inch scale length makes a very scenic addition to the quayside. The two platform stations is in Art Deco style, typical of the SR design. The adjoining customs house and customs shed dominate the goods area, with lines running along the stone-built quay, at the end of which is a lighthouse. The overhead gantry crane is a feature of the quay which has all the atmosphere of a small but busy port. The inner harbour is home to the local fishing fleet and typical quayside buildings, pubs, etc. As we look across the quay, we can see a C-Class in the original SECR livery, pulling some coaches away from the station. Rumour has it that these two are arguing over which comic series is better, DC or Marvel. Of course, we know Viz comic is the best one to buy. The schools class, which had arrived with the passenger service, is now departing back towards the shed, further along the line. It reverses towards the level crossing, awaits for the gates to open, and then moves across the quayside bridge.
Something happening down there that's causing the front bulbs to come off.
Thank you, we've thoroughly enjoyed
Good, come back again.
it. We will, right, you're good.
No, that is definitely.
This shark's a little lost and is asking for directions of how to get away, whereas this man has decided to dive for a penny. And now we get to see the fleet of fishing vessels as they rest in the quay. It's all very idyllic, really, isn't it? TT120 Move Over. This is classic TT. It's 3mm scale and is presented by Paul Hopkins. The layout is Exbridge, a small West Country cross-country railway line based around the River Exe. It is a BR Western Region layout which operates in the changeover period in the 1960s, from steam to diesel traction. The Southern also operate their interchange services. The track layout incorporates a junction station with 3 platform faces, one of which is a loop platform for the branch line train. The small country goods yard is adjacent to the station area alongside a village street with shops, car workshop and garage. And a bus garage. Part of the layout includes a viaduct across a river in a country setting. The feeder yards are at the rear of the layout, provide storage capacity for up to 8 trains. The majority of the buildings are scratch built or adapted from 4mm kits, and rolling stock is typical of the area and periods modelled.
Was it? Not anymore, it's not.
Here the warship on the small passenger service passes over the viaduct and off on its journey. Now this layout I think is great, and it's something I've seen before, or that I'm aware of, but it is Bunkers Lane by Fluid, and it's a 7mm scale layout on 009 track, or described as 09 gauge. Bunkers Lane is modelled in 7mm scale, but on 9mm gauge track, which makes it equivalent to 18-inch gauge, the type of system used around brickworks and on estate railways. This lovely walkabout layout has lots to see, and it is visually fantastic to look at. In fact, we can watch this diesel go right round the layout from the passing loop all the way to Bunkers Lane itself. There is a wealth of detail to look for, lots of cameos that appear around the layout, and a very bright pink ice cream van on board as well. The Ruston arrives at the station, and it's a very busy scene. There's that bright pink ice cream van I told you about. Cars are parked in the car park, people are enjoying their day out, and the workmen are taking a break by the hut. As the locomotive and coaches arrive into the platform, we pan out and can see the motive power depot. I'll walk around to the other side of the layout and we catch a glimpse of an engineering train as it passes along the single track, heading towards the passing loop. Due to the nature of the scale, locos and rolling stock are scratch built, and they're very impressive too. The engineering train passes the farm gate before arriving at Hindley Green passing loop. We come to Wolfstadt, which is by Craig and Lewis Charity. It's a 3.5mm scale HO gauge layout. This is a father and son project which has taken 12 years to build. It is based on an Austrian theme taking inspiration from the present day high alpine routes. Modelled to HO, the model is controlled by DCC Wi-Fi using a Rocco Z21 system and smartphones. Wolfstadt was designed as a portable layout with the viewer presented with a constant flow of trains which are modelled to full length. And we can see here they haven't disappointed. They endeavour to have something moving at all times, and I can tell you that they did. It was very entertaining to watch. I'm not going to pretend to know what trains I'm looking at here, so I'm just going to let you enjoy this wonderful layout.
Master Prodigy today. Yeah, with We have got a Z21 available to you. We've not incorporated it. So yeah, this one's running on the Gauge Master Prodigy with Gauge Master the Prodigy's own Wi-Fi module, which generates the power to the mobile, which is quite straightforward.
We now come to Wimborne Station, presented by the Wimborne Railway Society. This is 00 fine scale. The model represents the line at Wimborne from just east of the low narrow bridge at Lee Road to the west of the Stour Viaduct, but just short of Lady Wimborne's Bridge. For just short of 40 years from the opening of the original line and the opening of the line through Sway, Wimborne was the busiest station in Dorset. Unfortunately, Wimborne is no longer on the railway map, and today there are only faint traces of the line and its station. The model that has been constructed is a historical replica of this once important station. The station area is to scale, but the curves at each end are considerably greater than in real life. All the major structures are built as accurately as possible, although some of the buildings are slightly out of position in relation to each other due to the constraints of the baseballs. Trains are run suitably for the line from mid-1950s to the end of passenger services in 1964. The aim of the layout is to have lots of activity, up and down lines running, while shunting is carried out in the yards all around. It's a hive of activity, far greater than probably would have occurred in real life.
So you've got to imagine a warm summer's day down in the south of England. This is a holiday special. It's full of buckets and spades. People coming down on holiday to go and dig in our beautiful beaches.
Yeah.
So are we good on the imagination? Yeah, I'm pleased about that. Sorry?
Now we're at Cholerford by David Milford, a 4mm scale and 00 gauge. The layout is based on Humshaig Station in Northumberland, which was situated on the 42-mile-long former border counties North British Line in Northumberland. The line left Carlisle to Edinburgh Waverley route at Riccarton Junction and joined the northeastern Newcastle to Carlisle line to the west of Hexham. The period of operation is usually the early 1950s through to closure of passenger services in 1956 and goods services in 1958. In reality, by this time the loop lines had been removed, but these have been retained in the model. The station had quite extensive goods facilities compared with other BCR locations, and this provides scope for added interest when operating at exhibitions. Rolling stock and locomotives on the layout attempt to reflect the wide range of types in use around the last years of operation. As far as possible, the individual locomotives are models of those which actually work the line. As a group of modellers who remember the railway scene of the late 50s and early 60s, rather than the BCR in its heyday, they like to imagine what might have happened if the line had remained open, at least until Dr. Beecham came along in 1963. Now here's a layout that's always pleasing to see in an exhibition. It's Hills of the North, the Spirit of Shap. It's by Graham Nicholas and Friends, and it's a 4mm scale 00 gauge layout. No 00 gauge model railway could ever truly hope to capture the vast expanse of the wild North Country fells that are the setting for one of the country's most iconic stretches of mainline railway, the formidable 1 in 75 climb to Shap Summit on the West Coast mainline. The Spirit of Shap is therefore presented as a vignette of the famous piece of railway centred around the scene at Shap Wells, a location simply referred to by the late Ivor Peters as classic. The layout takes 3 places of the climb of Shap Bank and blends them into one continuous scenic presentation some 35 feet long. In the uphill direction, trains enter the scene at the right-hand end under Greenholm Road Bridge. This then transforms into the classic location as the railway runs along a prolonged embankment, crossing the road to the Shap Wells Hotel. The majority of the viewing section is given over to this scene, allowing sizable length trains to be positioned in the landscape. As the train enters Shap Wells Cutting, this in turn becomes the more sizable cutting on the approach to Shap Summit itself, passing beneath the distinctive lattice footbridge that takes a public right-of-way high over the railway. Emerging from the cutting, trains pass the sidings and signal box at Shap Summit before disappearing off scene again. The layout is set on a gradient which represents the 1 in 75 incline, so the trains really do have to work to make it past Shap Summit. This includes the facility to recreate the banking arrangements for some of the heavier trains, with the banking engines dropping off at Shap Summit before returning down the hill towards T-Bay. The scenic work attempts to capture the bleak open moorland setting with plenty of dry stone walls, 51 feet to be exact, but few trees. A graduated forced perspective approach has been applied behind the main line to blend into the back scene. The layout is set in the pre-1973 era, and with most trains set around the BR period, there is the occasional LMS locomotive to be seen, as demonstrated here. This is Duxbury, presented by the Leamington and Warwick Model Railway Society in OO gauge. Duxbury is loosely based on Aylesbury Station in 1960. By doing this, the modelers can cater for steam in its BR guise as well as diesels and electrics. The variety of steam locomotives that can be run is quite large, being drawn from the ex-Great Central, LNER, LMS, Great Western from the Princess Risborough branch, and BR standard types. Aylesbury was also the terminus for the Metropolitan Railway trains from Aldgate and Baker Street, with a bay platform being provided for the purpose. These trains were electrically hauled to Richmond Worth, where a BR locomotive would take over. On the extension of electrification to Amersham in the early 1960s, the Aylesbury service was discontinued. Using modeller's license, they have imagined that the London Transport extended the electrification to Aylesbury. The main line and branch line leave the fiddle yards and curve round into the main station area, passing the engine stabling turntable and London Transport storage sidings on the right. The station has one bay platform with a run round, two through platforms and a loop platform which normally serves the branch. Behind the branch platform is a small goods depot. The two-track main line leaves the station and curves back around into the fiddle yard. Here we come to Euxton Junction, which is presented by the Preston and District Model Railway Society. It's a 4mm scale, OO gauge layout. This all-action, modern image layout is based on the West Coast Main Line in the modern era. It is complete with overhead continuity system. Here is 66745 passing by with a freight service. Next is Colas livery class 66846 on a fuel train as it slowly draws towards the platforms. As it draws towards the station, we catch a glimpse of a Class 37 with Caroline the inspection coach and the EWS business train as it passes by on one of the lines. Class 37 finally has a proceed in its signal and moves off, whilst the Pride livery Pendolino passes by in the background. Next, a pair of direct rail service Class 68s, one of them still wearing its former Trans-Pennine Express livery, pass by on a nuclear bogie. We catch up with the Class 68s further along the line, whilst in the opposite direction, Shedmate's DRS Class 66s pass by with a ballast working. I've never been to an exhibition with so many TT scale layouts, although this one's in TT 120 and it's presented by Stephen Burrows. The layout is called Church Hill and it demonstrates what can be currently made with the available products from Hornby. Here we see a Swallow livery HST passing the engine shed. At the other end of the layout, we catch Great Western's Castle Set HST as that passes by a Class 50 in a siding and a couple of stored locos at the goods shed.
Yes. Like on a, in a box on a trade stand, you can't necessarily see He's new. He hasn't been run in yet. Oh, okay. He's chipped.
There was also a display of micro layouts at the exhibition, presented by the members of the Leamington and Warwick Model Railway Society in various scales. There was a haunted house, a very nice snowy castle scene, and a hops farm.
These have got the NEM boxes on there. I've guided it on NEM boxes. I need That's the reason they can send it in the UK, because they've got fewer parts. And this is going for charity? Yeah, that's 100% for charity. The stories that are painted on the high street. Incredibly good printing. The printing is fantastic. And yeah, this is colours. Well, I'll probably take it. Fantastic.
Also presented by members of the Leamington and Warwick Model Railway Society is the Modules, an OO gauge layout. This layout is really several layouts all brought together to create one much bigger layout. Each section is owned by an individual club member. The modules are all linked together by means of common connections. They can be controlled either as the module itself or remotely, and can all be swapped around to add variety. Here we can follow the Devon Bell round the layout as it passes through a nice snowy scene, then through a nice little harbour scene, and then this amazing haunted town. Look at that glow in the dark, before passing by the power station. The power station even produces its own steam. Must be hard at work for the amount coming out of that funnel. Well, it just wouldn't be one of my exhibition videos without me butchering the Welsh language. Unfortunately, Chris Featherstone's got me covered with his layout of Millennia Barty. I'm assuming that's how you say it. It's a 7mm scale, 16.5 gauge layout. It evokes the atmosphere of fictional mid-Wales narrow gauge railway, primarily transporting slate products and passengers. While the arrangement itself is conjecture, almost all of the landscape buildings, practices and rolling stock depict scenes from the real railways and locations as they were in the 1930s. He admits he's an unashamed rivet counter. At the centre of the layout, as can be seen here, is a model of Maspoth shed and store from the Corris Railway. The small station is from Aberfenny, and the slate mill and weighhouse are based on those at Bryn Idlath, the mine served by the Talloch Linn. The scenic section is a representation of the cop over the reservoir of Aberfenny, which carried the tramway to the mines up in the hills. In reality, this would have been horse or gravity worked. This is Rush Green Colliery, which is presented by Richard Green in 4mm scale, 00 gauge. Rush Green Colliery is set in the West Midlands. The layout tries to give a good representation of the collieries that once were spread around most of Britain and depicts the main features of an industry that has been virtually wiped from our landscape today. The layout was constructed by Alex Rushton and Richard Green with assistance of members of the Coventry Model Railway Club. Apparently there's a penguin to spot on this layout as well. I couldn't see him, unless it was a penguin wrapper or something. I mean, there's a couple of seagulls taking a bath here, but I can't see a penguin. Here we see Hollybank number 3, one of the National Coal Board locos, passing by with a rake of mineral wagons. Next, one of the workers' trains passes by in the opposite direction, with a couple of old four-wheel coaches in tow. Our final glimpse is of an austerity saddle tank locomotive as it passes by the column. Now we come to Lower Hanworth, presented by Mike and Andrew Sharp. This 4mm scale is 00 gauge and 009. Lower Hanworth is a small village on the edge of the Cotswolds. The only industry is the stone cutting works manufacturing paving slabs. The works are served from the adjacent limestone quarry, which has its own narrow gauge railway. As well as a means of transporting the stone to the main line, the railway also runs a limited passenger service to the village of Lower and Upper Hanworth. Now we come to Central Works, presented by the Luton Model Railway Club in 7mm scale, 0 gauge. Central Works is based on a fictional car assembly plant with some likeness to the intense network of sidings that once existed around the complex at Longbridge in Birmingham. Although this was an Austin factory, it has been made deliberately region neutral to allow the opportunity for the owners to feature different car makes and types, plus interesting rolling stock periodically. Although electrically and predominantly scenically complete, it is still a work in progress, being the last project of the Gauge O section of the Luton MRC. The layout has two segments, the main line exchange sidings and the industrial section of the factory complex. Stock is predominantly freight, but the occasional passenger operation may be seen arriving at the short platform. These are generally worksman's trains and do not appear in public timetable. Traffic for the factory arrives in the form of raw materials and is exchanged into the works via the industrial locomotives. Completed vehicles are then returned back to the main line for onward transport on car-flat vehicles. A feature of this layout will be the ongoing development of the back seat with lighting effects and steam and smoke emissions from the various factory processes. Additionally, a working coal tippler is in use which provides fuel from loaded wagons to the plant boiler house. The tippler is generously donated to Luton MRC by the Model Railway Club of London, so would enjoy future use on the layout after their Happisburgh layout was decommissioned.
No, it's alright, that's fine. We're with you in just a moment. Just give them the new wagons a call.
We move across to Burshaw Northwestern by David Forshaw in 2mm scale N gauge. This is a fixture station location on the West Coast Main Line in northwest England. The overhead wires are almost complete as part of the Weaver Junction to Glasgow project to finish the West Coast Main Line electrification from Euston to Glasgow, which will be switched on in a couple of years' time. New 4-aspect colour light signalling has recently been commissioned as part of the upgrade. It is the early 1970s, steam has gone and is still banned from the main line. The British Rail corporate blue-grey image is sweeping across the country, but not yet complete. The top system has yet to be implemented, so all locos still carry their original numbers. The D&E prefixes are disappearing as there are no longer any steam locomotives numbers for them to clash with. Some are still in green or electric blue, with varying amounts of yellow in the front ends, as well as red and blue. Coaching stock is mainly in blue-grey with the occasional maroon interloper. The Midland region has just taken delivery of its first air-conditioned stock, the Mark IID, but most trains are formed from Mark 1, 2A and 2C stock, gradually being cascaded as the new designs take over the prime trains. We move across the pond to this 3.5mm scale layout in HO, HON3 and HON30 Bear Creek Junction, presented by Adrian Hall. No other railroad construction in the Old West, not even the mountains of Washington State and Oregon, presented the hazards and difficulties of the terrain first penetrated in the 1870s by the Rio Grande. Men and mules alone accounted for the mountain grades that brought the 3-foot iron to Alamosa and Silverton and over Marshall Pass into the Gunnison country. Although a fixed location, the layout is set in one of the many canyons typical of Colorado, where mining and logging took place. Here you will be able to see fragile wooden trestle bridges curving round mountains, view soaring steel trestles crossing valleys, and hear the sounds of steam engines roaring out of rock-faced tunnels. This is serious mountain model railroading, and you are advised not to feed the bears. Now with a little more locos in the start of the video, this is 82G Bristol Temple Coombe Road Shed, presented by the 82G group of the Worley MRC members, in oak age. Back in 2001, after almost 10 years on the exhibition circuit with the Loco Clinic, the original group decided they needed something to exhibit and run their completed locomotives on, set in the real environment. Being predominantly locomotive modelers, what better than a loco shed layout? A location that was needed would have to be realistically accept locos of the former Great Western, London, Midland, Scottish and Southern Railway companies, and the area around Bristol seemed to fit the bill perfectly. Rather than trying to think up a fictitious name for the shed, it was decided that it would be a nice and somewhat different to stick with the shed code as its title. So the next available Western region code was chosen, and 82G was born. The group's modelling interests predominantly centre nationalisation and the early to mid-1960s, hence the predominance of motive power in the standard BR liveries. But it's not all BR steam. They do have some locos running from the Big Four period as well as some in early BR experimental liveries and transition brandings. They also have quite a few diesels, so steam doesn't get all its own way. At exhibitions, the scene transitions during the course of the day, progressing slowly from pre-nationalisation through the various BR periods, then incorporating the introduction of diesels into the British Rail's portfolio, concluding with the sad decline and end of steam and full dieselisation. At the longer right-hand end of the track layout is adaptation of that found at Bournemouth, with the layout being heavily westernised, but still retaining a few southern touches, such as the famous lifting shed and hoist often seen in photographs of the time. At the end of 2010, about 10 years after layout construction first started, the layout was further extended by over 60%, the new section being at the left-hand end, enabling the owners to complete the shed buildings, providing a new link between the areas at the front of the layout and the addition of more sidings and stabling points. At the same time, they also converted to DCC, which has allowed more operational flexibility and portrays the sounds as well as the sight of a working locomotive depot in steam and diesel days. Work on a layout is never complete. Little tasks remain, but also a larger task of upgrading the coaling facilities, which should be completed in the next 12 to 18 months. Coal tipper was posed for the purpose of the video, but my understanding is that in the future it will actually automatically work. So that'll be a lovely, interesting picture to see. I look forward to seeing this layout on the exhibition again in the future, as it is one of my favourites. After coaling up, the ex-GWR mogul backs towards the turntable to be turned to prepare for its next turn of duty.
Trevor, yes.
Hobby apparently. My wife doesn't think it is.
I know Trevor was there.
Yeah.
Bubbles, obviously.
Naturally, yeah.
We finish our visit as we move back to the other end of the shed as former rod locomotive, to the hands of GWR 3017, reverses towards the main line. We move to industrial China in the 21st century. This is Peugeot, presented by Paul Stapleton. It's a 3.5mm scale HO gauge layout. The layout was inspired by Paul's many trips to China to photograph the last of Chinese steam. The layout is set in 2001, and by then the remaining steam action was centred around the heavy polluted industrial cities in the north of China, and Peugeot is set in the northern suburbs of such a city. I have seen this layout many times before, and in fact the owner, Paul, had once asked me to produce a video dedicated to this layout just itself. If you want to see more of it, you can find that video on my channel. Stratford and District Model Railway Club presented their layout Holywell, which is a 4mm scale 00 gauge layout. It is based on Holywell Town Station in Flint, North Wales, and the period model is the 1950s prior to its closure in 1957. The station had steep embankments on either side, and the branch was noted for its incline of 1 in 27 to the station, which they have attempted to replicate.
Yeah, with something.
Being stuck through the spokes has a tendency to do that.
We now move to Street and Way Sidings by Richard Bridgman. It's a 7mm scale, O-gauge layout. The layout depicts a busy goods yard serving the surrounding areas of Streeton. Although fictionless, it is based on the steam era of the LNER region. The layout was built to offer interesting operation in a relatively small space. The use of fully operational scratch-built turntable allows wagons to be manipulated from trains entering the yard, while other trains are prepared for the outward journey to the connecting branch line. The majority of the wagons and locos are kit-built. The buildings and line-side accessories are kit or scratch-built. Here we see an LNER Sentinel preparing to move a brake van out of the way in preparation for the arrival of another goods train.
That'll go down the middle.
With the brake van now removed out of the way, the signalman accepts the goods train that arrives in the centre road.
So I stuck in.
That's what I said when I bought this car. I said, "You're going to keep it in the garage." I said, "Oh, yeah."
On its arrival, the locomotive is uncoupled from the goods train and placed on the turntable in preparation to run it round. We come to Cottleston by Ben Adlington, a 4mm scale 00 gauge layout. Cottleston is a fictional town with a fictional railway, but if it did exist, it would be somewhere between Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, where the pre-grouping railway companies once competed to transport the area's abundant coal. The station was built by the Great Northern Railway on a secondary route between Nottingham and Sheffield. At its heyday, the station had a double-track main line, up and down freight loops, a link line to the Midland Railway branch to Ikerwood, a small goods yard, and connection to a large military stores depot. However, post-war rationalisation saw the passenger services withdrawn, and a gradual closure of the area's coal mines led to the contraction of lines until only the military branch and a cement terminal at Akerwood retained rail services. Following the success of the Robin Hood lines reopening from Nottingham to Mansfield and Worksop, further funding saw the reinstatement of services from Nottingham to Akerwood, requiring a reversal of the reopened Cotteston station. The success of this venture saw the reopening of the line to Sheffield and creation of a new platform using the former goods shed as a platform canopy. The station now sees frequent passenger services between Nottingham, Sheffield and Akerwood, with cement trains still running to Akerwood. Dodged survival of the military depot, though, numerous defence cuts see regular trains of stores and military vehicles using the exchange sidings at Cotteston. After positioning by mainline diesels, the depot's own fleet of industrial shunters trip them to the depot. Traffic is controlled from the lofty GNR signal box at Mog's Eye, and semaphore signals dominate. Their days are numbered, though, and replacement colour light signals are already installed, ready for switching on. Further modernisation will see the manual gates at Crow Lane replaced by barriers worked from Mog's Eye signal box, and the barriers are already in place, ready for commissioning. The layout uses Pico Code 75 track throughout. Control is by a Gauge Master DCC system. The working signals and points are solenoid controlled. Buildings are a mixture of scratch-built or modified kits.
Because we're on solenoids, not servos.
Yeah.
When I built this, there wasn't anything such thing as servos.
No.
Solenoids are brand new.
So yeah, you're cleared to go all the way to Sheffield now in weekend.
Okay.
We finish our visit as the Longmoor Military Railway livery 08 shunter moves around some vans in preparation to take them to the military stores.
What's going to confuse me is when the headlights come on and one's red and one's white on the same end. Got it from 9:30. And it was busy. I mean, I walk around there every week.
You've done a few Bedfords, have you? What were you in? What regiment were you in? Oh.
No, I missed it by 18 months.
Oh.
Ben, number 13, can you come off the military branch and stop in front of the signal box?
Yes, I can.
It stops people coming this way trying to fall off the layout.
I don't know why it's...
We pop over to the wonderful Bond Lane by the Limerick family, the 4mm scale 009 and 00 gauge layout with the very active background. Here, a thunderstorm is happening. It's all very clever stuff. And now we join Abbotsford by Robin Fox, a 2mm scale N-gauge layout. Set in the early 1960s, Abbotsford is a fictional town on the Cheshire Lines Committee route between Manchester and Liverpool. The layout is a double-track main line with a through station which has 4 platform roads, 2 of which are bays. There's also an engine shed and small goods yard which can be shunted independently, thus adding extra interest to the trains passing on the main line.
You want it to go back to red? Yeah.
When this one goes through, it's going to turn red. Oh, it's red already.
Well, you don't know what might be going on.
Perhaps there's points in there, and they might slip down.
We come to the Heart of England narrow gauge modular layout. This is the Heart of England narrow gauge modelers collection in 7mm scale or 016.5 gauge. This layout is made up of several smaller layouts which are completely interchangeable thanks to being built with the common arrangements for joining them up. This means that group members can build their own layout at home, and then when the occasion allows, several can be brought together to create a much bigger layout with greater operational flexibility. Having run round its train, the Andrew Barclay loco moves away from the station back towards the fiddle yard.
Well, you've got the details, haven't you? So it's a case of
Over on the more industrial looking modules, we see a locomotive named Stan, moving a couple of coal wagons and a guard's van. Once Stan is out of the way, this locomotive called Judd will move some skip wagons. Presented by Stuart Bailey and Craig Holt of the Hindley Green Model Railway Group, this is Egworth, a 4mm scale OO gauge layout. The town of Egworth is situated between Bolton and Blackburn, and the line branches off to Silver Quarry, which saved it from closure. It is being modelled as a dual-era layout, from the BR Blue period, which is currently being depicted, to the present day, with Northern Rail and Network Rail featuring. The layout has some sound-fitted stock and has scenic sounds and lighting, such as a fire in a barrel and a cyclist with lights on the bike. The signal box is lit up and a working signal with sounds. There is plenty of things to look at on the layout, such as plethora of gardening equipment in the allotments, along with various animals. As we wait at the bridge, we see a ballast train being propelled towards one of the sidings, whilst a DMU departs the station platform.
Yeah. It is, isn't it? So what speed did you manage to get? So because it's not the super deluxe. Yeah. It took the original speed.
Our next layout is Paulson's Pickles, 7mm scale O gauge, presented by Kevin and Maggie Smith. Paulson's Pickles is a compact 7mm scale O gauge shunting yard set in the 1950s. The yard is a pickle works, so raw materials come in loaded into vans and in barrels, and the finished created products leave in vans and open wagons. The operation is 12-volt DC, and the layout uses a sound unit to provide the engine exhausts, whistles and other sounds. It was built on an old flush panel door, which provides a cheap and flat surface for the layout. Points are operated by servos, and the couplings and all the stock are by Dingham, operated by hidden magnets under the track. The owners say it is very easy to tie yourself in knots with this layout. Personally, I'm more concerned about the Dalek, or the footplate of the shunting loco, but we will have our priorities, I suppose. We now come to Humphrey Road Sidings in OO gauge by Norman Raven. It's winter on Humphrey Road Sidings, and this layout depicts the southern region in the 1950s, as though nationalisation had not taken place. The layout is set during the winter, as evidenced by that layer of snow covering. The layout is controlled with DCC and sound. Here we can observe a bullied Q1 freight locomotive preparing to back down onto its wagons and shunt them towards the brake van before departing towards the main line. Snow is very rarely modelled, but when it is, it always looks really nice, and it's such a change to the usual summer scenes that are so common on modern railways. So it's quite a delight to stand here and, even though it feels a little cold, watch the engines busily shunting in the sidings. With the train all coupled up and ready to go, the guard blows his whistle, waves his green flag, and the Q1 makes its way towards the main line.
So just that one? Just that one switch. Just keep going. You know that big rocket car that's just opposite there?
Sorry.
And for the last taste of the show, I've saved all the narrow gauge layouts in 009. That's mostly because the 009 Society were all in one room. This is Angst Lesport. You may recognise it, you may not. Maybe there's something familiar about it. Well, that's because it's presented by Hugh Lord in 009 gauge, and it draws inspiration and is a tribute to Discworld by the late Sir Terry Pratchett. Although superficially a Victorian Edwardian townscape, many characters and architectural features give clues to the layout's true identity. Helping to set the scene are the Alchemist's Guild Hall, one of the many watch houses, a clacks, which is a semaphore tower, and of course the Mad Lord Snapchase curate set. Most of the buildings have been built from card, mostly breakfast cereal packets, and a number have internal illumination and so are internally decorated. Most of the human figures are from Langley Models, Andrew Staddon and Aidan Campbell, with some from Peter Goss. The wargaming fraternity supplied wizards, dwarves, trolls, and other out-of-the-ordinary figures. There's even a witch flying on a broom, if you look just above the coaches there. Now we move to Yulvard in Strat. This is a layout presented by Charles Insley, and it's HOE gauge in 3.5mm scale. The layout is set in southern Sweden, on the shores of Lake Väternini in Västergötland. You're going to have to just accept that I am not going to be able to pronounce any of this. I do apologise to anyone Swedish that's listening, or anyone that knows Swedish and is just offended by what I'm trying to pronounce. There's a lot of dots above letters here. It is the lakeside terminus of a 60cm gauge 2-foot railway which connected the small lakeside town of Yulvard with the standard gauge line of Skovit to Karlsborg. The line was built in the early 20th century and was first operated using imported French locomotives and rolling stock built by Decaville. These locomotives are still in service and were later joined by locally built stock. In reality, the layout is freelance, but inspired by the Swedish 60cm gauge lines that existed until the early 1950s. Though long closed, some of the locomotives have survived and can be seen in the Merifred on the preserved Östra Skånelands Järnväg.
I just have to.
We come to Oxfordshire for the Wantage Narrow Gauge Tramway by Richard Holder, 4mm 009 gauge. The Wantage Tramway was a standard gauge railway that linked the market town of Wantage to the GWR main line, which was 2.5 miles from the town. The tramway had some very unusual locos and rolling stock for a British railway, and the train shed is also pretty unique. Unusually, the small engine shed straddled the siding that fed the local gasworks. This little layout is Richard's interpretation of what the upper yard at Mill Street, Wantage might have looked like had the tramway been built as a 2-foot free narrow gauge line. Richard does not claim that this is an accurate model of the terminus, but he hopes that it does give an impression of the area in the 1920s. The original tramway closed to passengers in 1925, but goods traffic continued until December 1945. The railway buildings are accurate models of the originals, apart from the window sizes and styles. Here Richard has used plastic windows that he happened to have in stock. Some of the other buildings also have been scratch-built using card, plastic. The two main tram locos, the Hughes Tram No. 4 and the Matthews Tram No. 6, have been built using Worsley Works brass etchings. The models run on Cato 9mm gauge tram chassis. The three tram cars, numbers 3, 4 and 5, have also been built using Worsley Works brass etchings. Each of these runs on a Cato N-gauge bogie chassis. Wantage Tramway Manning Warnell Loco No. 7 is represented by an RT model standard gauge kit running on an adapted Graham Farish 08 diesel N-gauge chassis, built by the late Pete Wallace. Other rolling stock has been constructed from plastic kits of various prototypes from Great Britain and Ireland. This is Welford Coppice, a 009 and 00 layout. It is presented by Peter Cullen. This is a typical ironstone quarry railway set in the East Midlands in the late 1950s. Ironstone extraction was a fairly basic operation. The topsoil, or overburden, was removed by dragline and dumped in the adjacent fields. The ironstone was then transported by rail to blast furnaces such as those at Corby, Bilston, or in South Wales. Rails in the fields were lightly laid and frequently moved, and often a narrow gauge railway would bring trains of ore from outlying areas to an exchange point where they were tipped into standard gauge wagons for onward transportation. After the field of ore had been exhausted, the topsoil would be returned and the site given back to nature, albeit substantially lower than it was previously. And we come to our final layout, Spirit of Welshpool by Mark Holland in 009 gauge, although there is some 00 gauge in the back if you have a look. The Welshpool and Llanfair, I think I've got that right, light railway opened for traffic in 1903. The railway carried passengers and goods traffic until 1931 and the goods only until 1956. In order to reach the standard gauge line in Welshpool, it was necessary to route the line through the middle of the town. While the bulk of the line has now reopened as a successful preserved line, the final mile or so through the town has been lost. Spirit of Welshpool seeks to recreate some of the ambience of this missing section. The model attempts to stay true to the original track plan and to incorporate as many elements as practical of the prototype and the surrounding area. Where possible, buildings are based on remaining examples, such as the Wharf building, or on photographs, e.g. the now demolished buildings known as the Narrows. It is loosely set in the 1930s. The model is built in 009 gauge to a scale of 4mm to the foot and represents an actual gauge of 2 foot 3 inches. There is a small standard gauge section representing part of the goods yard of the original Welshpool mainline station where the narrow gauge line terminated. The layout operates to a timetable and that lasts approximately 2 hours. From the narrow gauge feeder yard, the line passes through Raven Square Halt, now the site of the Preservation Line terminus, past the standard quarry, onto 7 Stars Halt. The original building is still standing in Welshpool. It then passes over the Linden Brook and through the Narrows, now demolished to make way for a new road layout, before crossing Church Street and the Shropshire Union Canal, and then entering the narrow gauge goods yard, and then Welshpool Station.
Fires are lit up. That's a blacksmith's where they're putting shoes on the horses' feet. Did you know that horses wear shoes? Metal shoes. Did you know that? And they have to be...
Oh, that was going
There's a canal here with a canal boat. Well, it's a game where
I hope that you've enjoyed this video. It's been rather a long one, I do appreciate, but there was lots to see on the show. If you want to see more videos like this, then please subscribe to the channel. If you have enjoyed this one, then please click the like button. And hopefully, I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Oh, you're still here? Then why not watch another of my videos? I have exhibition videos, layout build videos, I even have podcasts, so there's plenty to choose from.